Hi, everybody. This is Megan.
And this is Steven.
And this is the Synchrony podcast where we talk about transforming apostolic dating culture and ending loneliness in the church.
That was a struggle.
Yes.
Uh,
Oh, man.
that was literally our 7th try.
I lost count at some point after you nearly snorted coffee out of your sinuses.
Yep.
Speaking of coffee, hopefully in your cup and not in your sinuses, Cafe 117. Let's talk about Cafe 117 for a second, babe.
Let's do it.
If you haven't heard us talk about them already, Cafe 117 is a partner of ours. I don't know if we've said this lately. We don't make any money from Cafe 117.
Yeah.
Like, they don't pay us to do this. So we do this because we love them and their mission, and we want to support awesome apostolic people doing awesome apostolic things. And they are awesome apostolic people that own a coffee company.
That's right.
And they use the proceeds from their coffee company, a pretty big portion of it, to support a variety of different apostolic aid organizations, like Compassion Services International, if you've heard of them. But you can order coffee from Cafe 117. They will roast it to order and ship it right to you on subscription. And it's delightful and delicious, and we highly recommend them. So start thinking about them now for all of your holiday shopping and enjoy. Oh, and you can get a discount.
Discount down below.
Yep. Here we are, babe.
Here we are.
What a day. What a week.
Yep.
It's actually been a pretty good week. Like,
Yeah,
nothing
no, it
cataclysmic has happened.
It hasn't been bad. It's just exhausting. I feel like night after night it's been late nights with the kids for different reasons. Not for terrible reasons, just for different reasons.
No, Monday the reason was that we had 3 dates in a row.
And a kid peed the bed.
Yes, one of those things we just said is significantly better than the other.
Yes, I was talking about the late nights.
Yeah.
You were talking about positive. I was talking about the negative.
Right. Yeah. So that's been good. We're here. We made it.
Yep.
This is going to be a bit of a part 2.
Yep.
So if you weren't here last week, I'd recommend going and listening to the first episode on your values, because that's kind of like the basis of our whole approach. How do you feel like that episode went?
I think it went well.
Yeah?
Episode 36, I think.
Man, 36.
I know.
That's wild.
Yeah, I think it went really well. Honestly, we got to the hour point, which, by the way, we don't try to go for an hour. We're like, we're going to do 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And it always, recently, it's been going to an hour.
Yeah.
It got to the hour mark and we felt like we had more that we needed to say about it. So,
yeah, we never really got to the part of how to use values to make your dating better.
Yep.
So, obviously, if you want to work with an apostolic matchmaker and you sign up to work with us, we will help suss out the values that are most important to you on your dating journey. That's our job. But you might be listening to this and you're not ready to start a matchmaking journey, or it's not really your style, or you might not quite meet the criteria that we have laid out. And so you might be asking yourself, well, how do I use my values now that I sort of know what they are?
Yeah.
To help me date better.
Yep.
Okay. So tonight we're going to talk about how to identify values in someone else. The scenario here is that you've met someone, you're interacting with someone who is a dating prospect, and you need to know if their values align with yours. We talk about alignment, values alignment, as like the key kind of compatibility metric, if you want to call it that we use. And it's not scientific. It's not like an Enneagram thing where we sort people into categories or, try to fit everyone into these small boxes. But generally speaking, we want you to be with someone who wants the same kind of life and dreams the same dreams and is aiming in the same direction.
Yep.
Where do you feel like people maybe get stuck the most in their dating conversations? Like, what are the biggest hurdles to getting? Because I think my guess is that a lot of people never get to the values conversations. Why do you think that might be?
I think it could be a mixture of things. One, they weren't taught how to have deep conversations, right? We are in a world surrounded by small talk
and little sound bites.
Yeah. And the only examples you might have are your friends that also probably don't have good experience with having real deep conversations that are at least public, right? Where you know how to have those conversations because you've overheard someone.
Right.
Usually those are one-on-one conversations. You're not having those in a group. And so lack of training.
Yeah, I feel like that's a common stumbling block. I feel like sometimes we if we don't have people like teaching us about relationships, and I think many of us have not had any kind of instruction,
Yeah.
right? Then we take our lessons about what relationships should look like from media.
Yeah.
And if you're watching a movie and there's more than like 5 minutes of continuous dialogue where they're just talking, you're probably watching a really boring movie,
Yeah.
right? Like there has to be action, or like if it is a romantic movie and the two people are talking to each other, it's a montage of them like walking through the park or chasing each other through a store being silly, or
Yeah.
like they're getting to know each other in what we can assume is like hours of time spent together, but it's all condensed down into 2 minutes and set to some kind of a indie number,
Yeah.
right?
You're only seeing positive highlights.
Right. And if there is dialogue, it's centered in on the most like intense parts, like the famous like romantic speeches that come from movies, it's
Yeah.
the Mr. Darcy, like, you have bewitched me body and soul. I always go to that one because it's Bonnet. I feel like apostolic women watch a lot of Bonnet movies. I've never made you watch the Bonnet movies, have I?
Nope.
It's a shame.
It is
You made me
quite
watch
a shame.
you made me watch Star Wars.
Yeah. Well, I made you watch more Marvel than anything.
You did. Yeah, we had that deal going when we first got married. You backed out on that deal. That
Let's
was
not talk about this.
No, we're going to talk about it. We're already here. So the deal was, when we first got married, this was an attempt for me to bring
This
you
is
out of
before
your
we knew I was dyslexic and had ADHD.
Oh, yeah. So the deal was Stephen could okay, so for every 3 movies that I watched with Stephen, his choice of movies that he needed to introduce me to, because his sense was that I lived under a rock for
Which I'm not wrong.
No, you're not wrong. I hadn't watched any of the I still haven't watched many of the Transformers movies.
Mm,
Just a handful of movies that were like big when we were like in middle and high school,
yeah.
right? So he wanted to introduce me to those movies. Most of them involved superheroes. And for every 3 movies that I watched with him, he had to read 1 book. And I think you read 2 books.
We started counting audiobooks as books, so
Yeah,
I've
audiobooks
read a
count.
lot of books then.
Well, yeah, but not as part of the bet.
No.
Like, yeah, I did introduce you to The Things They Carried.
Things They Carried, Hatchet.
Hatchet.
I think was it The River? Or it was like this. It was like
That
the
was a sequel to
sequel.
Hatchet. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
I just want to point out that those are like at
I'm
5th grade reading
yeah, they're
level.
like definitely at like elementary, middle school books.
But they are fantastic
But
literature.
yeah,
I highly recommend.
they're a lot of fun.
Gary Paulson, the OG. Anyway, what was I saying before this? Books, movies.
How amazing I am at following through with deals.
Romantic dialogue. So anyway, so we don't have a lot of examples in our day-to-day life for what the conversations, the real actual long hours of conversation in an early part of a relationship should contain.
Yeah.
So we're going to tell you what they should contain in order for you to get down to people's values, down to the nitty-gritty. Why are you laughing at me?
Not laughing at you. Yeah. You said let's get down to, and immediately I started singing Mulan.
Let's get down to business.
Yeah.
To defeat the Huns.
Conversations about values.
So good. Okay, are you ready for my quick tips for learning about someone's values?
Yep.
Okay, quick tip number 1. Talk about important things. Yeah, I know. Just hang on. It's going to get even deeper if you can imagine that. This kind of goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago. People can stay so surface.
Oh yeah.
Like, okay, so this is a silly example, but like my Nana talks to her sister every day.
Every day.
every day, multiple times a day, probably. And the conversation goes something like this. This is my Nana and Aunt Carol, right? Well, good morning. Good morning. What are you having for breakfast? Well, I'm having a piece of toast and some coffee. What are you having for breakfast? Well, I'm having an English muffin and some coffee. What you gonna do today? Well, I need to go to the mall and return a dress. What about you? Well, we're gonna take the car down to the store and get an oil change. All right. Well, have you talked to such and such these days? No, I haven't talked to such and such these days. It's the same. It's the same format every time. It's just like it's the two. If you remember from the Jungle Book, the two vultures sitting on the.
Yeah.
Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Like people can stay in that vibe.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been on a phone call with someone that you think is interesting and it's like, hey, how's it going? What'd you do today? Cool.
Yeah.
What are you doing right now?
You know, I think anyone can fall into that
Mm-hmm.
if it's one of those relationships where you are always in contact with each other.
Like where there's not enough time for you to build up
Yeah,
questions.
like your text, and like don't get me wrong, there's like the excitement butterfly phase of the beginning of a friendship or a relationship. So like I'm not saying that you shouldn't like enjoy that.
Yeah.
But there becomes a point where you need to have a level of trust in the relationship where you can go a day or so without talking to each other.
Yes.
And then have time to build up to be able to enjoy that conversation other than, again, finding out like, oh, I had 2 pieces of toast today instead of 1. You know, like
yeah.
it's one of those things like you get to know it's like information saturation.
Yeah, that's such a good way to frame it because I think that sometimes we get like so caught up in the excitement that we want to immerse people in our lives or vice versa. And then when that adrenaline wears off of the early communication, some people just need to kind of take a break and decompress, right?
Yeah.
And and this is interesting, I've had couples recently who have gone through that, or they've like started talking, and then one person will need to kind of step away and catch their breath, and the other person like panics.
Well, they feel the distance,
Right.
not as something that they want to do for the relationship, but there's something that they got to do.
Yeah.
And so instead of giving them the distance, they do the opposite. They want to get closer.
Yeah. We're going to have to change it in a little bit. But the point here is that if your conversations are becoming very surface level,
Yep,
you're not going to get very far into understanding this person's values. So what do we mean by important things? What are the important things people should be talking about in this phase?
I mean, we obviously talk about values, but it's like you're wanting to get to the core of why someone ticks.
Yeah, I mean, even more like, I agree with you, but I think like even more sort of high level than that. Like, what are the topics that people don't talk about enough that they should be talking about?
Debt to income ratio.
Yes, money. Talk about your money. Talk about your credit score.
Yep.
Right? Talk about your financial goals. Did you have student loan debt? Why not? What kind of car do you drive? Are you still paying on that loan? How much do you have left?
Why do you choose to have a lease or why do you choose to have a car you pay for cash versus having a lease? Like really important things to you. I know we just did a lot of money, different things, but get in the topic of, like, oh, let's talk about children. How many kids do you want to have?
Yeah.
Oh, why do you don't want children? Well, let's talk about that.
Right.
And then once you find out all you can about that, then go like, let's talk about like different styles of parenting.
Yeah. let's talk about your job, not just what you did today at your job, but do you like your job? Are you passionate about your job? Do you want to stay at your job? How long do you see yourself being there? Right.
So one thing that I think this is important is a lot like friendships, relationships need to have a give and take.
Yeah.
So I notice, like I have a friend that I talk to all the time, right? And it's very easy. What?
I'm just thinking about Nick and how often you guys talk.
Yes.
Sometimes I will hear you talking to Nick on your way to the car in the morning when you're going somewhere, and I will hear you talking to Nick. There was probably some breaks in between, but you talking to Nick on the way back into the house.
Some days or not.
Just a constant stream of consciousness flow of brodom.
Yeah. Well, again, like this is just an example, but like some days, like depending on what we're doing or what we're talking about, it's easy because of how easy it is to talk to each other. What I end up doing on accident, I don't realize until I think about it, is like, wow, the last 5 or 10 minutes of this conversation, I have done nothing but talk about me in my life and my situation,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And then I will recognize it and then turn it around and try to engage and try to figure out like, oh, hey, how's it going with your work? How's it going to, we'll
Yeah.
like catch up about that kind of stuff. So same thing with relationships, like getting deeper to know someone and really having someone feel seen
Mm,
is getting into the conversations about like, hey, like, tell me about your job. Oh, okay. So you told me what you do. You told me about your boss's name. Well, okay. Well, how about what do you like about your job?
yeah.
Like get into the way the person thinks and feels about what they do.
Yeah, you got to get down to the emotions around it. And this goes back to a episode we had a while ago about making great 10-minute connections
Yeah.
and how you need to be sort of going back and forth in your discussion so that one person's not dominating the conversation.
Yeah.
Because if you're just peppering them with questions, it's an interrogation.
Yeah.
And if you're just talking about yourself, it's a monologue.
Yeah.
And it needs to be a conversation.
And again, open up doors and like think about the conversation from a third
Mhm.
person point of view and go, okay, well, I've just spent the last 5 minutes asking her questions, or I've spent the last 15, 20 minutes asking her questions.
Yeah.
Like open up an opportunity for her to ask me questions. Right. And
Yeah.
then be vulnerable, be and have that conversation with them. And don't be afraid to ask why.
Yeah, we talked last time about asking the 5 whys to get down to the root of your values.
Yeah.
It works in reverse too. Like why do you feel that way? Why is
Yeah.
that so important to you? Why is that something that you really think is, valuable? You can dig into their logic and ask them to unpack it for you as you go.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth saying that some people might struggle to even come up with the right questions to ask to get this started.
Yeah.
Right. And that's okay because, again, we're
Yeah.
not trained to ask this type of question to each other.
No.
Okay. So, talking about the most important things, one thing, a tool that might be helpful here, if you're not comfortable just like coming up with questions on the fly, they have these great conversation card decks and you can find them everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Like you can order them on Amazon. We like the one from John Deloney,
Mm-hmm.
which if you're not listening to the John Deloney show,
Oh, it's fantastic.
go listen to it. It'll make you a more emotionally aware human being.
He's one
Um,
of the Dave Ramsey personalities, but he talks about like he comes from a background of like trauma counseling and family therapy,
mhm.
and he just has so many nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah, cannot recommend highly enough. He has a card deck out called Questions for Humans, which we like. And it really is like they're questions that are fun to answer. You could bring them out with your family, you could bring them out on a road trip. They're great in these early dating scenarios because they get down to the core of who someone is and what they're about.
Yep.
And it just kind of it brings them down to a really safe and vulnerable place. Remember, chemistry is feeling safe, seen, and curious,
Yep.
right? And this can be a really great tool to cultivate that in this early phase of talking when you're just looking for ways to get down to those deeper questions about who someone is.
Yep.
Okay, so tip number 1 is to ask and talk about the important things,
Yep.
right? Tip number 2, going back to my handy outline that I texted you a minute ago, ask to understand and not to respond.
That's
This,
really good.
yeah, this kind of goes with what you were talking about a minute ago of like dominating the conversation, right? And I am particularly bad at doing this because I love to form a thesis and make a point with something.
No. No, not you.
It's a problem. I don't like to debate I do kind of like to debate. I don't like it when grown
You like a
men.
worthy opponent.
That made me sound so much cooler than I am.
No, I'm saying like I feel like when you find someone that is like equally as informed as you are, you enjoy the back and forth of a different opinion.
I do. I don't want to argue
No,
about
no,
it
no.
though.
No, it's a back and
Like,
a mutual disagreement.
right.
Like,
I don't like watching debates as blood sport. I cannot handle like the Ben Shapiro and like the people who are debating for the sake of the clicks,
mm-hmm.
right? And more power to them if they've got the energy for that and want to build a platform out of it. It's just not my jam. it's like competitive eating. More power to you. I don't want to watch that, right?
Yeah, sure.
That's an extreme version of something that I think should be.
Yeah, 35 hot dogs should not fit in a person's body.
That's the thing. It's like I feel the exact same way about that I feel about like raucous debates. It's like
Yeah.
I just want to have a calm adult conversation over a nice dinner.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
But yeah, so I have a problem with this whole like listening to respond thing because someone will start talking and I'm like, and then this like disproves or proves that. And that's not really effective listening. It's not active listening. I'm listening in order to take something from their conversation and make a point about myself. And that's ultimately not creating that space of safety. You know, like you have to stop and, oh, well, why do you think that? Like, why is that important to you versus just, would you stop laughing at me?
I was thinking about our conversation about Shamu. Anyways, we've already had enough detours. Let's just keep on going.
Steve and I have only had, I would say, two, I don't want to call them fights because we've certainly had disagreements,
Oh,
right?
sure.
And we've had intense
Like where
conversations.
the argument
escalated
in our like we don't like raise our voice at each other. Like we won't like
we don't fight over stupid stuff usually.
Yeah.
Like
But
this,
by golly, we talk about orcas in captivity.
two fights that really like escalated to the point where we both came away hurt. One of them was about politics. We won't get into that. The other one was about whether or not killer whales should live in captivity. And it's never been resolved.
We still disagree.
And our family does not go to SeaWorld as a result. Anyway.
One day we will go to SeaWorld. I'm bound and determined. We're going to get weird comments on this one.
Well, for the algorithm.
Yeah.
SeaWorld fanatics, have at it. Anyway, okay. So the whole point of this was that you're supposed to be listening to understand. You're looking for a sense of who they are. You're not trying to pick their answers apart in order to minimize them or in order just to spit your answer back out, right? Yeah. You're not asking questions so that they'll say something that you'll want to respond with. You're allowing them to help drive the conversation, right? Okay. And if you get into an argument, that's fine. Just take a deep breath and walk away.
It's okay to disagree as long as you're respectful.
Yeah, let's actually talk about that. So my next point was, conveniently, creating a safe space to share.
Oh, okay.
We talked a bit about this, how you need to be able to create a space that's like vulnerable.
Yeah.
But have you ever been around somebody who grew up in an environment where their first language was sarcasm?
No, not the West Palm Church.
This was really hard for me at your church.
Yeah.
When I moved to West Palm, this was actually a thing. Actually, this was the thing. So when I moved to West Palm, everyone there like had grown up together, really tight-knit youth group, big youth group, all with very like dry, deadpan humor, like painfully dry humor, and blank affect with their humor, just like delivering one-liners like this. Oh, so you think that you should do this? Really? And it was like, I had no idea.
If you didn't know their sense of humor, you thought they would just completely disagree.
I thought everyone hated me. I had no idea who, like...
Not everyone was this way, but yeah.
I had no idea who was being serious and who wasn't. I had no idea when they were making jokes. Like, I just felt I had such a hard time. So the first language was sarcasm.
Yeah,
right?
It is.
It is. And eventually I grew to adapt to it and enjoy it even and like, give back what I got. But like, it took a really long time. If you come from a family or an environment where that's very normal, and maybe you grew up in a home where lovingly every sentence was turned back at the other person into like a lighthearted jab.
Yeah.
Right? Or a tease. That's all well and good in your family where you guys know each other and understand each other. And that might be where you feel safe and what feels familiar to you. But it might not be familiar or safe to that other person that you're trying to engage with.
Yep.
And if they are trying to share themselves with you and you're constantly throwing it back in the form of jabs or sarcasm or lighthearted mockery, it doesn't mean
Yeah.
you mean anything bad by it, right? It can be really uncomfortable.
Yeah. It can create a space where someone doesn't feel valued,
Yeah.
or like that, like they're trying to have an intimate emotional moment with you, and you're making it lightheartedness of it, even though you might be completely serious, but that's just a way you respond to certain levels of awkwardness or like difficult conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I've even had to work on that with with even on our relationship, because there's been times that like I was like, in my family, with all like the trauma we had growing up, it was either you laughed or cried,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we ended up having a bad habit of laughing in like really terrible moments. And so I would sometimes cope with having a difficult conversation with coming up with jokes in the middle of the like hard conversation. And so sometimes I'll find myself like smirking right in the middle of a heated disagreement with someone, and it doesn't turn out well.
I'm about to throw you under a bus.
Uh-oh.
So it's the first year of our marriage. We're in our little one apartment.
Oh no.
And Stephen
I
had
don't know
this
where you're going with this.
Stephen had this habit of I would say, so I would make an observation about something and he would go, "Well, you're something." So
Oh
like
no,
it'd be
yeah.
like, "Oh, wow, like the sky is really blue today." And he'd be like, "Well, you're really blue today." And it was just like
Peak maturity.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was just like a dumb like little game you
I was
played.
being goofy, yeah. Like I
Yeah,
enjoyed
I'd be
being
like,
goofy.
"Wow, that those leaves are so green. Wow, you're so green." And it didn't
Yeah.
matter, like it didn't have anything to do with
There is a
me.
season where I did it to everything, yeah.
Yeah, it was just the way that you did stuff, and it bit you in the butt one time because we were newlyweds,
Uh
and I was putting on some happy weight, right?
freshman.
Freshman happy weight in our 1 year marriage. It's a thing, and I was talking about something like I don't remember, like maybe I think it was something in the apartment or something like a stain or a water stain or something. And I was
That-
like, "Oh, I think it's getting bigger," was this phrase I said. And without thinking, you said, "You're getting bigger."
yeah.
And you heard it.
As I was saying it, I was like, foot in mouth,
I
foot
saw
in
your
mouth,
face
yeah.
as you said it. You're like, "You're getting bigger." And like your whole expression was like, "Oh no." Like you saw it. And
Yeah. I was like, I'm just kidding. But you're like, damage has been done.
yeah, damage was definitely done. I think
Yeah.
I had a cry fest about that one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so be aware of your tendencies, right? If you do
Yes.
things, if you do things, if the way that you have, your sense of humor and your way of joking is going to make someone who's unfamiliar with it feel uncomfortable, don't throw it out, but just like temper it a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, and then this now goes to the opposite side of it, though.
Mm-hmm.
Say you're talking to someone who has a tendency of doing that and it's really bothering you.
Yeah.
That person might not know that it's bothering you.
Right.
So this is where, if you want to have a healthy, like, again, you're practicing for marriage,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's a relationship where you're not sure if you're going to marry this person, you're trying to see if this person will be able to handle marriage, right? So take this opportunity and recognize that what they are doing is bothering you, and say, in a loving way, have a conversation with them and says, "Hey, I was really trying to be sensitive with you.
Yeah.
I was really trying to be vulnerable. And I know that you weren't trying to hurt me or you were trying to be insensitive, but it really came across that way.
Mm-hmm.
Could you, in the future, whenever we're having a heart to heart, try not to joke as much, like, or just have some sort of communication with them that lets them
Yeah.
know, like, hey, you need to remember that they are not mind readers."
Right.
And I know that's such a cliche like statement that a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I'm not a mind reader," but it's true. At the end of the day, they
Yeah.
don't know how you're feeling, and a lot of people's habits are habits for a reason. They've been doing them for a long time.
Yeah, they're unconscious.
So that is good practice for marriage, because in marriage, even though you marry someone, you still don't fully know someone, right? And so there's going to be things that are going to happen that you think, like, "Oh, I'll just tolerate it." You don't really think about it. It's subconscious, like, "Oh, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal." But when they do it, 3 times a week for the first 4 years of your marriage, it kind of builds up over time
Mm-hmm.
until eventually you're like, "Hey, you've been doing this thing and it's really bothering me. It's still, at the end of the day, you're practicing for being able to deliver difficult information to then still love the person and want to get to know them deeper, but also be clear.
Yeah. Okay. So create a safe space for someone to share,
Yeah.
right? Make it warm. Don't make it judgmental, right?
Yeah.
Um, create a space where they feel like they can be vulnerable
Yep.
and be
And
seen for who they
yeah,
are.
and be clear and communicate if something's bothering you.
Right. Okay. This is the part that I'm most excited about for this. You ready?
I think so.
Okay. In order to have a productive conversation where you're identifying someone's values, right? And again, hopefully you've already done the work to go suss out what your own values are, what your heartbeat is, the things that really drive you, the things that you want to contribute to in the world, the things that you feel like inform what God is calling you to do. They are the why behind your actions and your calling and your lifestyle choices, right? So hopefully you've already gone and done the work to kind of suss those out. You need to, in these conversations with this person, ask questions that elicit the information about their values.
Mm.
And this is fun because this is something that I get to do all the time when
Yeah.
I'm meeting with people. So we have a handful of questions that some of them are kind of similar to the ones that we use in our consultations because there I focus specifically on like someone's values around marriage and family, but these could apply, I think, more broadly. And I want us to do just a little like demo of some of these questions. Does that work?
Sounds good.
Okay. Do you want to be the asker or the answerer? Answerer.
I don't know. Maybe we'll go back and forth. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
All right. I'm not going to actually, well, let's just talk about this one. I'm not going to ask it because we talked about it ad nauseum last week.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
The first question I have is this one might only be good if the person that you're talking to is like already a very introspective type. Like
Okay.
they think about their interior a lot. What should be different about the world because you were a part of it? So we talked about that a lot last week.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't just limit it to just introspective people.
Yeah.
Because people have to be taught how to be introspective.
That's fair. Yeah.
I'm not saying it's your job to teach someone how to do that, but I'm saying like asking sometimes like someone just needs to be asked the right question,
Mm-hmm.
and then it helps them think about it. Like you and the supply closet at your work, right? You have the capability of thinking deeply, but it took you really thinking about your values while
Yeah.
in the
Having to
supply
have the
closet,
space.
right? So same thing. Like I think asking that question regardless is really important.
Okay. I'm going to ask you this next one because I think it'll be funny. So this is me legitimately asking you.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
If I were to ask your best friend in the whole world what is important to you, what would he say?
I would have to say I really enjoy deep connections with people.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a tendency when I find a new friend or a new relationship or connection, I have it's almost, I don't want to say it's a problem, but it's like I have no problem asking very difficult questions off the bat. like so like whereas most people take time to get to know each other, I have no problem being very vulnerable about myself as well with other people. So I think the most important thing to me is having deep connections with people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what that person would say.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason why I framed this question this way, and we have a similar one in the consultation, is because when you put yourself in the mindset of your best friend, oftentimes when I frame it in the consultation, I say, think of the person that knows you better than anyone else in the world, not a family member, a friend that knows you inside and out, backwards and forwards, right? This person with whom you can be completely transparent. And generally speaking, a person's close friend is the person that they see who sees them in both the most realistic and the most unconditionally positive light,
Yeah.
right? Your best friend, that's not a family member. So it's someone
Yeah.
who's chosen to be your friend, right? They recognize your flaws, they recognize your weaknesses, they accept you for who you are, but they hold you accountable to the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
So when you go through the mental gymnastics to put yourself in the shoes of that friend, you're able to see yourself in some ways more honestly and with more compassion, right? Your best friend doesn't judge the places where you fall short of your values,
Yeah.
right? If you were to ask a very, very humble or a very, very insecure person, like, what's the most important thing in the world to you? They might scramble a little bit
Yeah.
because they'll go, well, that's important to me, but I don't always live up to that. Or that's important to me, but I don't always show it. Or, it can be challenging to sort of get that out of yourself. Framing it in, what would your best friend say is important to you, somehow relieves a little bit of that pressure
Yeah.
and allows that person to think more empathetically towards themselves and see themselves in a different light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
you answer the question.
My best friend would say that understanding human experiences is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm really driven to cultivate empathy and compassion for people living in different kinds of experiences. And that I'm interested in seeing the world from diverse perspectives.
Sounds about right.
And crochet.
I'll say, and old cat lady
Activities.
living in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah.
Okay. Next
Okay.
question.
Here, you asked me this. Well, you just asked me one.
No, that's okay.
Okay. You want to,
Sure.
it's this one right there.
Which one?
The second one, the short one.
All right. What do you want your legacy to be?
I think I want my legacy to be people learning to, I feel like I'm repeating myself. I want my legacy to be that people are more capable of thinking in different perspectives and putting themselves in the experiences of other people. I want the people that I interact with after I'm gone to see the world more fully and in more nuance than they did before. And I want my kids to be really good at that. And I want them to perpetuate that and their kids to perpetuate that so that ultimately the people that we're serving in the church are seeing the church as a place where they're going to receive compassion and respect. What do you want your legacy to be?
It's funny. These things that I say that I'm like really passionate about, I feel like I haven't been able to truly live them out the last couple of years, just because parenting's hard.
Yeah.
Like you're exhausted and you like, as you become a parent, it's less about you, and like you don't really get to fulfill those things. But I strive to want to go here. I would have to say, for the friendships and connections and relationships that I have, for those connections, for those people to feel seen as a result of me being in it. Like again, I don't feel like I'm living that to the fullest right now. I feel like I'm surviving on fumes when it comes to energy.
Yeah.
But I aspire to invest into people. I really enjoy the Paul and Timothy and or Paul and Timothy relationships, but also the is it Paul and Silas?
Yeah.
Like iron sharpens iron, and then also like I enjoy the mentorship aspects. I like those different levels of relationships. But now, like again, this sounds kind of selfish, but my goal isn't a selfish intention. I want to have those relationships to where people then can do the same thing for other people.
Yeah. So to teach people how to build that kind of depth of relationship. So the reason why I like to incorporate questions about like legacy, it's important to encourage people to think about the future, right?
Yep.
Again, if you're just talking about like, what did I do today? What did I have for breakfast? You can get really stuck in the now, and it's hard to elicit the right details about how they envision what's next. Because we're not always living completely in alignment with our values right now,
Yeah.
right? We're all striving. You mentioned this a second ago. Like, we're all working to be more aligned, but there's always gaps, right? There's always room for progress. So when you talk about legacy, legacy is sort of the ultimate mark that you've left on the world. And it's similar to the first question, but it's how do you want what you've done to carry on in the world? It gives it that sense of finality. Like, what do you want your ultimate contribution to be? And so it helps people get out of the now and think about the future.
Yeah.
All right. This is a good one. I'm going to skip to this one. What are you usually doing when you feel the most energized or the most like yourself?
Getting together with people.
Yeah.
Like, I enjoy social gatherings.
Oh, wait, like the wedding last weekend?
Yeah. Like that. I mean, that's more of an organized one, but like, I'm very much, I love the spontaneous, like, let's get together.
Let's go get
and
dinner. Let's go do the
let's
thing.
go to Sonic at 1 a.m, which I can totally not do right now.
Yeah.
But like the spontaneous socializing interactions, like,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like those are the most authentic, right? Those are
Yeah.
the ones where like you end up having a conversation till 2 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
and in the parking lot and having really deep thoughts and conversations with people.
So let's pretend for a minute that I asked you that question, right? And
Yeah.
all you said to me, because you weren't primed for this really deep conversation, was, oh, getting together with people, right?
Yeah.
I might come back with, oh, okay, cool. Why is that so important to you? And then you say, well, I really like, bringing people together. I like those authentic interactions with people. Me asking more questions about that is going to eventually get us down to this core value, which is cultivating those really deep connections and demonstrating to other people how to create those same connections, right?
Yeah. Some people might get a checklist of questions and go, oh, check, I asked that question,
Right.
instead of I'm trying to understand why.
Yeah. That's actually kind of the risk of the like card
The
deck.
card decks. Yeah.
Right. You can't always leave it at just the question. You need a
Yeah.
follow up to
Yeah.
really get down to the root of it,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, that's a good one for that. All right, you want to ask me one?
Yeah. Which one?
Whichever.
Okay. Here's a question.
Mm-hmm.
What was one of the most important lessons that you learned as a kid that you hope to teach your children someday?
That it's okay to be wrong and that you can be wrong gracefully.
Yeah.
I used to be very self-conscious about not knowing the right answer to something because my intelligence was like my calling card. So I would use that as kind of like my main like differentiator,
Yeah.
I guess.
And by golly, you show a crack in your facade.
Yeah, heaven
Like, yeah.
forbid. Heaven
Yeah.
forbid I don't know something. And so I remember getting really embarrassed about a few key moments where my knowledge ran out and somebody called me on it.
Yeah.
Right. So I learned that as like a preteen, I think, mostly. And it was really valuable too, because now I recognize that like being able to say, I was totally wrong about that and I missed the mark. Like I have so much respect for that as a tool, and it
Yeah.
demonstrates humility. Um, and I think it's really important to have in the church. So yeah, I would want to teach them that. What about you? It's a lesson that you learned as a kid that you want to teach your children.
Okay. This is going to sound a little negative,
Mm-hmm.
but it's rooted in positive. I promise.
Okay.
Be as authentic as you can be with
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to love people deeply, as long as you understand that they don't have to love you back that much.
That's a really good lesson. That your love for someone doesn't obligate them.
Yes, because I think I ran into that as a kid.
Yeah.
Because of course, I love deep connections. I love that if someone didn't reciprocate that, I didn't understand why.
Yeah.
And I took it as like I was hurt
A rejection.
by it. Yeah, rejection, and I didn't understand why that was not their language in which they communicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
They loved me in different ways. And I had to learn how to recognize that. And so, but that being said, doesn't mean I should stop loving people deeply.
Right.
So I think it's really important. Like I love seeing Lily and Fletcher. They like in very different ways. They're very authentic with themselves. Like Lily, and I love her little expressive like personality. She does not know a stranger if she's in the
Yeah.
right mood. And she will go and include people and like want to play with people. And I see the love of wanting to get to know someone, but I
Mhm.
also see the hurt when she doesn't understand why they don't want to play with her in that moment.
Right.
I see the look of confusion that I remember I used to have with myself. Um, but once I learned that it's okay for people to say no, it was easier to, it just set healthier boundaries.
Yeah. And to be able to give someone something without any expectation of it coming
Yeah.
back.
And honestly, loving that way is a lot more rewarding, anyways.
Yeah. Unconditional love, unconditional
Yeah.
compassion for people is a value of yours,
Yeah.
right? You are the type of person who believes in gifting people with your time, with your energy, with your affection and friendship without necessarily expecting them to bring that back,
Yeah.
right? So all of these things, you're hearing a lot of the same themes because
Yeah.
we're using these questions to get down to the core of who we are as people,
Yeah.
right? You might have to do a little bit more digging. Obviously, like we're used to talking about this stuff, like when you're asking these questions, but these are the flavor of questions that drive people to think about what's really important to them. And they can start out from a very innocent place, right? What would your best friend say is important to you? But they require that person to be introspective.
Yeah.
Fair warning, you might be talking to someone who gets uncomfortable about this, right? If they haven't been in a situation where they felt like they could really be themselves or express their emotions, this might make them feel like they're under a microscope.
Yeah.
Um, they might find it easier to do some of this over written communication, like in text message, than they would over a call. Um, or they might prefer it if you guys were making this into a game where you're drawing cards or you're pulling questions out of a hat. So it's not just them being put on the spot.
Yeah.
But try to find a way to talk about that discomfort and push through it because
Can
it's
I
important to kind of unpack these things.
can I make a point real quick?
Yeah.
This is why it's so important
Mm.
that when someone is allowing themselves to be vulnerable, some people it might be for the first time,
Yeah.
and choosing to not turn it into a comedic moment
Mm-hmm.
is really valuable because some people might be opening up for the first time. They might be very sensitive about talking to someone about something very deep. And so maybe sarcasm is not a good point in this, right? At that it's not good to add in that point. Um so just be sensitive when someone's starting to open up, try to be respectful,
Mm-hmm.
and create an environment that they can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's how you really get to know someone.
Yeah. I think it's, you know, all of what we're describing is a skill, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I wish that there were like a foolproof questionnaire that you could bring into your relationship. And honestly, we might try to put together some sort of a resource that has some of these questions on it. But no matter how nicely we pack this into a PDF, it's going to take more than just you reading questions off the page to do this well. Because the skill is not asking the question and listening to the answer and writing down, they said that this is important to them. The skill is understanding what the things they're telling you mean about who they are.
Yeah.
Stephen telling me that he enjoys getting people together wouldn't really matter in terms of me assessing my values unless we got down to the root of I enjoy getting people together because deep connections with others are important to me. And I can go, oh, that's something that's really important to me too. And that's why I think that it's so important to cultivate compassion and empathy for people, right? We're going to be meeting on common ground there. But I have to get down deeper than just the what, right?
Yeah.
I have to get down to the why.
Yeah.
And if you're coming away from your conversations with someone and feeling like you're not getting a sense of why those things are important to them, it's a sign that you might not be asking the right questions,
Yeah.
or they might not be giving you enough of an answer for you to really put it together.
Yeah. I think this is chemistry.
Hmm.
Learning people's why.
Yeah.
I know. I think a lot of people turn chemistry into a physical act.
Right. It's they're thinking like
Like they're thinking of
the
like the
butterflies and
touchy
the
feely
goosebumps.
like goosebumps like. And the thing is this is chemistry.
Yeah, feeling
That
seen, safe, and curious.
Yep, and learning about who someone is and why they tick and who they are, and I think that is what helps you like build closer connections
Right.
with someone.
Finding commonality.
Yeah.
Right.
So regardless, the thing is I want to say this also works well with friendships.
Absolutely.
So this isn't just relationships. Again, the give and take concept. If you have everyone knows a friend that only ever wants to talk about themselves,
Right.
right? Or vice versa. They only ever ask questions and you try to ask about them and they clam up and you don't ever feel like you really get to know that person.
Mm-hmm.
What usually creates a really close friendship is when someone they're both mutually reciprocating information and vulnerability with each other. And
Yeah.
so I think that this is a skill that you can practice with your friendships as well, not just not your dating relationships.
Right. So get into a place where you've created that safety, ask about the big questions, and then ask why.
Yeah.
Right. Why? And it doesn't have to be just about their hopes and dreams. Why does your family have that tradition?
Yeah.
Right. Why is this your routine every day? Those things, if you keep drilling down to the root behind them, are eventually going to get you down to the reasons for why this person occupies the space they do in the world.
Yeah.
You know.
And so for the people who have already like gotten really good at this skill,
Mm.
you might think that this is kind of like really simple concepts or like, why in the world am I listening to this? But there's also people that have never had this conversation before.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this is the point of the podcast, is to really reach all areas of dating practices and like experience.
Well, also, if you are in a new relationship, right? It's very easy to get caught up in the drama of the new relationship and spend the whole time talking about, like, if you and I were on a date, would you let me hold your hand?
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
Like, or like, what are the most attractive things to you about someone of the opposite sex? Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's very tempting to spend all of your time in like the slightly appropriate, spicy questions about the relationship, right? That cultivate that sense of romance or that sense of passion.
Yeah.
And like, as long as you're staying in holy, like,
And
no,
not talking after like 10 o'clock.
right. No harm, no foul if you want to ask a few of those like fun, flirty questions, right? But those are not going to tell you who that person is,
No.
right? We talked about a past relationship that I was in that was very difficult. That was a long distance relationship where all of our communication was over the phone,
Yeah.
right? We did a lot of talking and did not get down to the why really for over a year, at which point I could see so clearly that our whys were not the same.
Yeah.
So the faster you can get down to this, and it doesn't mean you have to grill this person and
No.
you've got 30 minutes to unpack your values for me and or this isn't going to work. But use those first few weeks of this relationship, the first couple of months, to really drill down into these things.
Yeah.
And open yourselves up. And you're going to save yourself just a lot of time and heartache.
You made a good point about long distance relationships. I was going to say it earlier. Earlier in the podcast, we talked about only ever talking about surface level things.
Right.
And then, what did I say? It was like information saturation.
Yeah.
With long distance relationships, you really run the risk of that. So basically, with long distance relationships, be careful, because you run that risk of information saturation, and then if you don't ask deep questions, and maybe even already have, allow yourself time to like give yourself permission in the relationship to say, hey, let's talk tonight.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to text you. I have stuff I need to do. Let's have a conversation later. I won't be able to text you for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
I care about you. I want to connect with you, but like I have stuff I need to do. And there's a way that you can do that and it not sound shady, and you can also say it in a way that calms any insecurities too.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So we're giving, I guess, sort of a framework more than a formula for
Sure.
this.
Yeah.
You're going to have to figure out how to adapt this to your own style of communication. It's not a silver bullet, right? But hopefully, having an understanding of what your values are and how to ask the kind of questions that will elicit the values from someone else will give you more of an opportunity to match up,
Yep.
right? And that's what we're really trying to do. Or if you still feel like this is just outside the scope of what you want to do, you can come work with us and we will do this for you in your consultation.
Well, help
We'll help. It's
with the beginning process.
doing pre-work on your own
You
values is
you
important.
still have to get to know the person on your own after we match you with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to say about values or anything we left off from last time that we want to make sure we covered?
No, I think we nailed it down a little bit better.
Yeah.
But we didn't mention NYC.
Yes. So we are going to be doing another in-person Synchpin drop at the ALJC National Youth Conference in Nashville.
Woo woo.
Yeah, I've never been to this conference. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah.
So it's in Nashville. It's over Thanksgiving holiday, which is when they always do this, which is kind of smart because like everyone's off already. So if you are going to the ALJC NYC conference, we will be there. We will have a booth. We will be giving out sync pins. You can just come up and get one.
That's right.
For free.
For free.
Yep. If you are not going to be there and you want to get one, you can go to the link in the description and you can register for yours and we will ship it to you.
Yeah. For all you have to pay is the cost of shipping.
Yep. So definitely get your sync pin. As a reminder, if you don't know what those are, they're these beautiful little lapel pins that we created to help singles identify each other. Oh, you know what? I moved it to the desk over there. Don't worry about it.
Insert here.
Yeah, we'll put up a picture.
Yeah.
They are these lapel pins that we created to help singles identify each other in public apostolic spaces. So while we were talking just now, I got a text from a friend who's at a conference this week and she was wearing her pin and she sent me a picture. Yeah. So I love to see that. It's exciting. So definitely if you take pictures wearing your pin, please, if you're comfortable, put them on social media and tag us in them.
Please tag us in them.
Yeah, we love it. And it gives us a way to kind of popularize them and share them. We want to see people style them in different ways, on different bodies, on different types of people, different ages, like sync pins for everyone.
And no promises, but if this starts taking off, we'll probably end up coming out with different color varieties and stuff like that. But
yeah, we've talked about different ways that we can.
And maybe not just a lapel pin, like maybe different ways of wearing it. But
I want a sync pin hair stick.
I thought of the hair stick. I thought of tie clips.
Yeah.
I know not many people wear cufflinks, but I love the idea of sync cufflinks. I think those would
maybe
be really
someone
cool.
will wear them to their wedding when they get married.
That's
after
right.
They've been match made.
That's right.
So yeah, that'll be cool. We can't wait to see everyone at NYC.
Belt buckle.
God.
Big belt buckle.
The funny part is I know several people.
Oh yeah.
That would be all about that.
Oh yeah.
Amazing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to talk about. I'm going to do a little teaser.
For sale.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
So, this podcast is going to come out, I guess, the last week of October.
Yes.
And starting in November, next month, toward the end of the month, we're going to be kicking off our end of year sale.
Yep.
So it's not live yet. We're telling you this because we know that some of you have people in your life that you've been talking to about Synchrony and they're like, I don't know, it's expensive. I don't know if I want to do it right now. Totally valid. The end of the year is the time that they're going to want to jump on this. So we're going to have some sale pricing go live right after Thanksgiving, and your friends and loved ones can take advantage of that. If there's somebody that you want to bless with a Synchrony consultation, they can get in at that point. You can buy them their consultation with a gift card. So those sales are going to start going live at the end of November. Please make sure that you're sharing the socials so that people can stay up to date or put them in touch with us if they have questions. We want a lot of people to get involved. So we're excited. Right now, I've been in a slew. I've been in a slew of matching and date hosting. There's been like a ton of people going through dates, and now it is time to reinvigorate our pipeline with some new guys.
Yeah.
So
Thing is all these dates are fantastic, but that means people are being taken out of the pool.
yeah, when
So
people match,
we need more people in the pool to keep on taking them out.
yeah, when people match, I'm like, okay, now I got to go find new people to match with new people. So, anyway, now's the time to start talking to your friends about it and getting them excited about it. Keep an eye out for more on that sale pricing as we get closer to the end of November.
Yep.
Hey, babe.
Huh.
I love you.
I love you too.
Even though you
Despite
believe that
the way you feel about orcas.
Even though you believe that those beautiful, brilliant creatures should live in a swimming pool.
I did not. You're skewing my words.
It's tragic. Their dorsal fins all floppy.
Uh-huh. We will continue this conversation later.
Have a great week, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Hi, everybody. This is Megan.
I hit the mic. All right.
Hi, everybody.
No, that was really bad. It was like chocolate rain. Anyways.
I do not have the energy for you today. Oh my God, could you drink that any freaking louder? Sounded like, can't wait to hear that on the playback. Hi everybody, this is Megan.
This is Steven.
I want to go to bed tonight at some point.
It's not in my control.